Does our friend eke out his modest income with a crossing? Or has he his Nebuchadnezzar phases? He inquired. I feel assured it's this business of the time machine, I said, and took up the psychologist's account of our previous meeting. The new guests were frankly incredulous. The editor raised objections. What was this time traveling? A man couldn't cover himself with dust by rolling in a paradox, could he? And then, as the idea came home to him, he resorted to caricature. Hadn't they any clothes brushes in the future? The journalist, too, would not believe at any price, and joined the editor in the easy work of heaping ridicule on the whole thing. They were both the new kind of journalists, very joyous, irreverent young men. Our special correspondent in The Day After Tomorrow reports, the journalist was saying, or rather shouting, when the time traveler came back. He was dressed in ordinary evening clothes, and nothing save his haggard look remained of the change that had startled me. I say, said the editor hilariously, these chaps here say you've been traveling into the middle of next week. Tell us all about little Roseberry, would ya? What will you take for the lot? The time traveler came to the place reserved for him without a word. He smiled quietly in his old way. Where's my mutton? He said. What a treat it is to stick a fork into meat again. Story, cried the editor. Story be damned, said the traveler. I want something to eat. I won't say a word until I get some peptone into my arteries. Thanks. And the salt? One word, said I. Have you been time traveling? Yes, said the time traveler, with his mouth full, nodding his head. I'd give a shilling a line for a verbatim note, said the editor. The time traveler pushed his glass towards the silent man and rang it with his fingernail, at which the silent man, who'd been staring at his face, started convulsively and poured him wine. The rest of the dinner was uncomfortable. For my own part, sudden questions kept on rising to my lips, and I dare say it was the same with the others. The journalist tried to relieve the tension by telling anecdotes of Hetty Potter. The time traveler devoted his attention to dinner and displayed the appetite of a tramp. The medical man smoked a cigarette and watched the time traveler through his eyelashes. The silent man seemed even more clumsy than usual and drank champagne with regularity and determination out of sheer nervousness. At last, the time traveler pushed his plate away and looked around us. I suppose I must apologize, he said. I was simply starving. I've had the most amazing time. He reached out his hand for a cigar and cut the end. But come into the smoking room. It's too long a story to tell over greasy plates. And ringing the bell in passing, he led the way into the adjoining room. You've told Blank and Dash and Chose about the machine, he said to me, leaning back in his easy chair and naming the 3 new guests. But the thing's a mere paradox, said the editor. I can't argue tonight. I don't mind telling you the story, but I can't argue. I will, he went on, tell you the story of what has happened to me, if you like, but you must refrain from interruptions. I want to tell it badly. Most of it will sound like lying, so be it. It's true, every word of it, all the same. I was in my laboratory at 4 o'clock, and since then, I've lived 8 days, such days as no human being ever lived before. I'm nearly worn out, but I shan't sleep till I've told this thing over to you. Then I shall go to bed, but no interruptions. Is it agreed? Agreed, said the editor, and the rest of us echoed, agreed. And with that, the time traveler began his story as I have set it forth. He sat back in his chair at first and spoke like a weary man. Afterwards, he got more animated. In writing it down, I feel with only too much keenness the inadequacy of pen and ink, and above all, my own inadequacy to express its quality. You read, I will suppose, attentively enough, but you cannot see the speaker's white, sincere face in the bright circle of the little lamp, nor hear the intonation of his voice. You cannot know how his expression followed the turns of his story. Most of us hearers were in shadow, for the candles in the smoking room had not been lighted, and only the face of the journalist and the legs of the silent man from the knees downward were illuminated. At first, we glanced now and again at each other. After a time, we ceased to do that and looked only at the time traveler's face.